Hey, you're trolling here. I'm talking about the top 10 worst cards in Legends of Runeterra today. Yeah, the worst. Now, not necessarily the worst in the sense of a card like Caustic Cask, where it's a 1-mana 0/1 that just does 1 damage to both players. Terrible to play. That's a card that doesn't make sense, right? It does like to have the tokens in the game as well. So for use cast salesman to work, that does need to be a card. I understand that. That's fine. So I'm not going to be talking about stuff like that. And I'm also not really going to be talking about cards like Back Alley Barkeep, where you get a 4-mana 3/2 that gets you a bunch of random stuff if you play a bunch of them. Because that's not a very good card, but it's not the worst because I think its design is fine. It's supposed to be a fun card. It fills a niche for players who want to have those kind of cool, wacky experiences. Definitely good. Nothing wrong with that. There's nothing bad about it. But it still isn't a very good card. Now, the worst cards that we're talking about is cards that don't only perform poorly, but they also just aren't fun and have very boring design and need to be reworked to make them interesting. Think about a card like Funsmith. Funsmith was a card that had relatively interesting design, but was very bad at 5 mana. Now you bring that down to 4, the card ends up being playable. And sometimes that's the only adjustment you really need, is just to, reduce the cost of a card a little bit, and then it becomes playable. And that's good. That's really all we want to have happen in Runeterra. It's a game where the developers are really happy to go ahead and change things. They're not, like the Hearthstone team of old, where they would really make no changes to the digital cards that they have. Hearthstone team now does actually make some changes, not as many as Runeterra or as many as they should. But, hey, they've gotten better. That being said, Runeterra can be better as well, even though they're already doing pretty well. So we're going to be talking about some cards that I think could be changed to make the game a little bit more exciting, and bring some of these cards that you've opened up in your vaults or chests to light and actually make them playable. First up, from Foundations, we've got a wonderful card called the Feral Mystic, a card that I didn't even actually knew existed. I had no clue at all. I was kind of looking through this, trying to find the cards that I thought were the worst, and I was like, wow. I don't think in the thousands of hours I played this game, I have ever seen anyone play this card before. It's basically like Emerald Awakener's little brother that's a lot shittier. You kind of just take the 2/2 tag, and then you're like, hey, well, this card has Overwhelm instead of Lifesteal. So let's just like take 1 mana off, and then that's fine. You're eventually going to have a 2 mana 6/6 with Overwhelm when you have 10 mana, which is great, right? Wonderful. But then you're playing a 2 mana 2/2 with Overwhelm, which never does any Overwhelm damage and does nothing else. At least in the context of Emerald Awakener, you're having a 3 mana 2/2 that can heal you. It's really good in Ionia. For freljord, you don't really need to play a 2 mana 2/2 with Overwhelm, especially nowadays when you have for freljord card that is literally a 2 mana 3/1 with Tough and Overwhelm. A little bit better, right? My suggestion for this card would to be just add 1 attack or 1 health. I don't think that would really do too much, but it would make it a little bit more playable. I think the best idea would probably be just to entirely remake it. Maybe make it like a 4/2 Overwhelm, no Enlightened, something like that. If you want to include that still in the game, that's fine. I think that just simply plus 1 attack or health would be fine then. It's at the point where its cost is a little bit too low to just, take 1 off. You can't go, hey, this is a 4 mana card, I'm going to make it a 3 now. Because it's a 2 mana card. If you take 1 off the cost and make it 1 cost of 1 mana 2/2, Overwhelm with Enlightened plus 4/4 is really good. And if you go the other direction, or you take stats off of it and you make it 1 mana, I don't really think it's going to be any better. So I would say probably just make it a 3/2 or a 2/3, and it's still probably just not going to be very good, but at least it's going to be a little bit less bad than it is right now. Next up is Sewn Seeds. I think this is a card that was really interesting for me specifically because I did play with it a lot right when I got beta access. It was one of the first cards that I jammed with like a Zed Cat Arena deck, and I did really, really well. I think I went like 25-0 with it in a deck right on like day 1, day 2, and it was super, super sweet. Big win streak, popped off a lot. But the thing is, the card's kind of garbage. It worked because I would use a bunch of elusive cards and cards that would gain value for me, like buffing them in hand over and over again and bouncing them back and forth with like the old elusive mechanics and how that used to work. Unfortunately, now it's not really a thing because all of those elusive cards have been nerfed like 50,000 times, which is kind of good because they were sort of toxic. But kind of just leaves Sewn Seeds being bad. My suggestion for this is, instead of being a 2 mana burst speed spell that says grant all allies in hand +1/+0, you can maybe change it to a 2 mana fast speed spell that grants all allies in play and in hand +1 attack. So you lose the burst option, but you gain the ability to buff your board, which I think is pretty massive in decks like this. And that might be a little bit too strong for 2 mana, but you switch it to fast speed, and it's something that I would like to see as a little bit of an experiment, right? It's something that you can play in a deck for Ionia that tries to go wide and then have a big buff that's really nice. The thing is, individually as a card, it doesn't really do well unless you have a big board or a bunch of units in hand, which is cool. So you're going to play this in a more of a minion-based deck, and it will promote like a minion-based strategy, which is really nice, and I think that would be overall healthy and potentially even create new archetypes for this game, which would be fun. And if it's a little bit too strong with that effect, what can you do? Nerf it. Very good. Yes, it's possible. So that's just my suggestion for it, but the card's really bad and one that you don't really want to be playing with. That being said, I do think it is one that newer players do play a lot because it's just something that makes sense with a lot of the starter cards you're going to be getting. And it's not actually super bad as far as like a horrible card goes, but it is really bad and I do think that it should be buffed. My last card here for Foundations is one that might be a little bit of a surprise to you guys. I have Spectral Matron as one of the worst cards I think in Foundations. It's an 8-mana 6/5 fearsome card that says play, pick an ally in hand, summon an exact copy of it. It's ephemeral. So, I mean, you think about it, it seems good. You play an 8-mana 6/5, you get a play effect where you get to summon a card from your hand. It's ephemeral, obviously, which is cool. But it just so happens that you're paying 8 mana for that, and you're having an 8-mana 6/5 you'll draw and have to sit in your hand for a long time usually. And then you have to have the perfect card with a good summon effect attached to it to make it worthwhile. Let's say like the Rekindler. Cool, you can do that. Or you could have just spent Rekindler as your turn there and then had another card in your hand that actually does something. Basically, my point is that the card's just really, really bad. And it doesn't really do too much as far as like fulfilling somebody's fantasy or, you know, creating like a niche situation happening. In the sense that Back Alley Bar keeps a bad card, but at least it's fun a lot of the time. This is a card that I find to just be bad and make everything a little bit worse. I think if you want to make it a little bit better, you should probably make it like a 6-mana 5/5. I think that would be quite a bit better. It would be a little bit strong, obviously, because you then cheap big things into play. So maybe you want to make it like, I don't know, a 7-mana 6/5, something like that, you know, just somewhere around that range. It's one of the ones where I think you could, you know, tack a cost or two off and be a little bit fine with it. Not worry about it too much, because whatever you would end up playing anyways with it that's going to be super impactful and big is usually going to be costing 8 or more anyways. So instead of playing Spectral Matron plus that card, you could just play your good card and have it in play forever. That's kind of my argument for it. So then maybe you can like cheat out your 8-drop and play like a turn earlier or something like that. That's fine. You still run the risk of running Spectral Matron in your deck and it can still be bad, but at least the card has some payoff and has a home. Because right now I really feel like it doesn't. It's one of those cards like the other two that I mentioned, you really just never see. And that's kind of the gist of all these cards here is they're just bad and they're not played. They don't have a reason to be played and they're not really good enough to warrant one. Again, all these are just my opinions, by the way, so feel free to disagree with me. And let me know in the comment section below what you think the worst card in all of Legends of Runeterra is by a similar definition to mine, where you think it's a card that, you know, isn't just like Caustic Cast, because that is a bad card, but it doesn't make sense in the game. I'm talking stuff like the Feral Mystic, for example. Give me an example like that. Let me know if you disagree with what I think as well. Because, I mean, Spectral Matron, for example, you could just completely disagree with, think the card is actually great. And, you know, maybe I'm off the boat on this one and tell me why. Let me know if you think I'm really wrong about any of these. And so, yeah, what you guys think the worst card is in your opinion. Next up, Rising Tides. Probably my favorite set so far, just because Swain and Leviathan came in during this time. I think I like this trend of starting with cards that I didn't know existed, so we're going to do that for Rising Tides as well. Number 1, Strong Arm. Card looks kind of cool, not going to lie. Looks sort of scary. It's like you're being a thief. Makes sense from Bilge Water. It's cool. But the thing is, a 6-mana slow spell that says plunder, place a follower in play into your hand, I have absolutely never seen in my entire life. Not in any game mode at all. Labs, you know, expeditions, ladder, never anywhere. This card is so expensive for a slow spell that requires plunder to be online. It is just bad. Yes, this can get a little bit strong if it is too cheap, but I don't really see a reason why this couldn't just be 5 mana. This is just such an easy small buff that they can just throw into a patch note that doesn't matter at all, right? It's like, here's an irrelevant change, and maybe if 5 mana the card will actually see play in, like, I don't know, 1 out of every 15,000 decks. And then you get a little bit of data on it, and they'll be like, oh, this is a 35% card win rate card. And then maybe they'll be like, okay, we'll change it to 6 and fast. And then maybe that's actually okay. Then it'll see like a play rate of 1 out of 1,000 decks or something. And then they'll be like, okay, this is fine for the card. Good enough. But where it's at is absolutely disgusting. This card needs to be changed, in my opinion. It's just, it's non-existent in the way that it is right now. Doesn't fulfill any fantasies, and it doesn't do anything at all. No Strong Arm in there. But we are going to strong arm into the next card. A very good one. Sap Magic. And by good, I mean really bad. This is one of the worst parts about playing a deep deck. You're going to have this sometimes. Occasionally, it will be nice in the sense that you do get Toss, which is good for the tree. But the problem with it is, as Maokai's champion spell, it's just kind of bad. The heal all allies does not work on the Nexus. I've tried that like 5 times. It does not work, so don't do that. It heals your crappy cards you have in play. And if they're deep, sometimes it does matter, but usually if you have a big board of damage deep cards, you're still just going to win anyways. It's not really that big of a deal. And I do understand that some champions should be balanced around their champion spells, but I don't think Maokai is too overpowered, and I don't think that he really needs to be one that needs to be balanced around this card. So what do I really think needs to be changed about this 3 mana burst speed, toss 3, heal all allies 3 card? I think that what should actually happen is it should probably just read heal all allies 3 and then simply just summon one of our good old buddies, Dreg Dredger. You get your toss 3, but you also get a 1/1. The reason for this is it just gives you another chump blocker. It's a very small buff, but it's one that does end up becoming quite relevant, I think, in the sense that you can block like a big unit that's, you know, a Demacia deck's throwing at you to try and help you get a little bit later on into the game. And, you know, maybe it'll be the case where Deep's a little bit too strong later on, because we have seen some nerfs to Deep decks, specifically even to Dreg Dredgers as well, right? This card used to be a 2/1, now it's a 1/1. You know, potentially in the future, this could be problematic, but right now I don't think it is, and I think this would be a good change for now. And again, one that really, I mean, you're not losing too much buffing it by, right? Like, again, if it's too strong, just swap it back and, you know, make Sap Magic a card that's still in the vaults. You know, maybe you'll lab up something else that's good Riot Games and make it a little bit better. But right now, it's terrible. It's not very good, not very fun to play with, and I think it should be changed. Next up is a 6 card and the number 5 card today. It starts with an S. So I guess cards that start with S's are just shitty in general. Sapling Toss. 1 mana burst speed, summon a sapling at the start of next round. Next round start. This is a card that's a 1 mana burst speed spell that gets you a 2/1 challenge, which is not bad. But the thing is, you do have to pay for it in the future. So you're going to have to know it's useful for next round. It basically just doesn't do anything when it's drawn right away, which is kind of bad for a card already. Like, you can just picture it's like a 10 mana, I don't know, some random card that you can't play when you draw it. Which is bad. When you draw cards, you want to be able to play them. And you also get like no guarantee that it's going to be good on the next phase. And it's specifically really bad whenever you don't attack. Which is kind of bad. Because half the time you don't attack. Unless you're playing Demacia and then you're a cheater and I don't want to talk to you. But basically the card's just bad in every way and sense that you can think about it. I've had a couple people when I was streaming a lot during Rising Tides try to tell me that this is a playable card, it's decent. I tried it out a bunch and I really just didn't like it, and I don't think it really does anything better than any other card that could give you the challenge effect would do. So personally, I'm not a big fan, and I think that it should be reworked. The reason this card is so bad is because you can only play it half the time because the sapling you get is ephemeral. And I think the easiest fix for this to make this card a playable card and one that's decent is to just summon a sapling with a different name that's not like all the other saplings in the game that are ephemeral. I think it should just be a 2/1 sapling that you summon that takes a round kind of delay, but burst speed again. I think that's perfectly fine. Your round starts, you get a 2/1 sapling in play. That's cool. It's a really unique and interesting card then, because then you can have another card that's going to be summoned to block for you right away. You can cast a burst speed the round before. So if you're in a situation where, I don't know, you have 2 spell mana and no mana for minions and you need to block something or you're going to die, you can play a Sapling Toss. It'll be summoned next round and it'll block for you. Which it could do right now, but you can summon preemptively even when you want to attack and all that kind of stuff and have it just sit there. Basically, the point being that the buff is that it just won't die, so you don't have to really care about doing it at very specific times. That's the whole point, I guess. It becomes more flexible and therefore more playable. Cards become a lot better when they're more dynamic and less static, meaning that you can play them in a lot of different situations and they have many different uses. This card right now, very static. You make it lose the ephemeral tag. It becomes more dynamic as it lasts for longer and you're less punished by when you play it. We are on to Call the Mountain, and holy shit, it is another card that starts with S. Sunk Cost, which is exactly the type of issue you're going to be having if you're putting time into playing decks of the type of cards I'm talking about here today. So, you get an 8 mana slow siege spell that says place a unit or landmark into its deck. So there's a lot of things that are wrong about this. Number 1, it costs 8 mana. You're playing an 8 mana card in this card game. Spells less so than units, but you know, you're still investing 8 mana. It's your whole turn, basically. You need to basically win off the spell. It has to be really good, or the unit. It's way too expensive otherwise. It has a high opportunity cost of playing it, because you have to have it in your hand for so long in most cases. And even if you do have it in your hand and you can play it, you still forego everything else you can do in a turn, which makes it a really hefty investment and one that you need to have huge payoff with. And it kind of turns out that the payoff is, well, it's slow, so you can't cast it during combat, and all it's doing is placing a unit or landmark into its deck. It's basically like a Vengeance. It just works on landmarks as well, but it's slow speed, and it's just not very good. It's quite bad. I think you could make this 7 mana as a slight buff, and maybe it'll be playable. I mean, I feel like with the slow speed, you'd have to make it like 6. At 5, it would be really, really good. It would see play at 5. At 6, it would see play. At 7, I think it's still probably just too bad. So I feel like 6 is probably where they should do it, but if they're going to buff it, they'd probably just make it 7. Or rework the card entirely. Moving away from the asses, we have another card that I actually remember talking about, but have never seen play. A Rel the Tracker. We can just change that to a Rel tracking, I don't even know what. The only thing I'm tracking is why is this card 6 mana? 6 mana 2/5 Noxus Epic. A Rel the Tracker round end. If you cast a spell on me this round, I strike the weakest enemy. Jesus. So it's a 6 mana 2/5. You have to spend 6 actual mana playing this card. And then you have to invest spells on it, so its effect goes off. Yes, this is kind of nice targeted removal for Noxus, not gonna lie. But why is it 6 mana? Is there, like, even at 5, this card is still really bad. Like, it's kind of ridiculous. You have to have very specific things lined up for this to be good to begin with, right? Like, you need to be playing a deck that runs cards that are important, that have low cost attached and low health. And, you know, I'm thinking stuff like, I don't know, Zoe, Teemo, and those already died of literally everything. So, you know, your options are limited for what you're really killing with this. And the fact that you have to invest spells into it is really difficult as well, because you don't really have too many ways to keep your cards alive in Noxus. And obviously you can't combine other reaches that do help, but then you're building your entire deck around a 6 mana 2/5 with some shitty round end effect. So you don't want to do that. So this card should probably be like 4 mana, maybe, you know, 5 if you wanted to see a little bit of play, but not very much at all. 4 if you wanted to have like a decent shot of being good. Number 9, Dusk Rider. This is a wonderful card. Super great. 5 mana 2/5, Fearsome Nightfall, grant me +1 attack for each time we've activated Nightfall this game. Wonderful. Yeah. There's a Noxus card that's a 5 mana 6/5 with Fearsome that you don't have to activate Nightfall 4 times with for it to be okay. And that card's still pretty bad. So you can imagine how shit this one is. So the only thing about it is it kind of is in the game. Initially, my thought was at least as an unspeakable horror nerf, which is kind of fine because before the initial pool that you had for Nightfall cards was really powerful. And I thought that was like an okay way to sort of like balance the mechanic, because I mean, the Nightfall cards to begin with were all really good. And I mean, they're not bad, but you know, the ones added haven't really been that good. Like Evershade Stalker, not great. But as a 5 mana 2/5, I don't think this card really ever sees play outside of being randomly generated and you know, jammed in just because of that. And usually, I mean, because you could be randomly generating it, be playing a Nightfall deck and then actually get a little bit of stuff out of it. You know, you have like, I don't know, your 4/5 Dusk Rider for 5, which if you're at the point playing a Nightfall deck where you're randomly generating things is usually fine. But I could see this card just being 4 mana. Like, come on, there's no reason why this should still be a 5 mana card or have the effects and stats that it still has. It really doesn't matter if it's buffed a little bit, in the sense that, oh man, Unspeakable Horror is going to be too strong, right? Like, it doesn't do anything at all. I just change the stats a little bit so you have another option to make it playable. Even, you know, make it a 4 mana 2/4, for example. Just do something like that. Don't make it 5 mana. That investment is absolutely massive. The jumping cost between units is just huge, especially in a deck like Nightfall where you need to have this Nightfall effect activated, where your cards really aren't 2 drops. They're cards that need to have something played before them, so you need to have either spell mana to activate a spell first, then play your card, or to play a unit first without Nightfall, or with Nightfall you can just, you know, throw one away if you want. But to activate a Nightfall, you need to have something played first, which makes just curve cards that are expensive, difficult to use, and really bad. So I think this needs to be cheaper, and it will make it at least not a completely horrible card. Number 10, arguably the absolute worst card in this entire game. One that frustrates me more than anything else, due to the fact that it's so stupid that it should not be a thing. Relentless Pursuit. This card makes me literally want to stop playing the game. So Riot, please buff this card, because they really just need to have me stop playing sooner. Please, I would really appreciate that. This card going from fast to slow really mattered a lot, as everybody can tell. Yeah, it's just super relevant. So good job on that one. Let's buff it to 2 mana. and make it fast again. Maybe even burst speed. That's got to be the way to make it playable, right, guys? That's how we should do it. Thanks for watching. Let me know if you guys like this type of style of video where I talk about stuff, discuss things, and kind of just share my opinions on things with Runeterra over just like regular gameplay, which I'm still going to be doing, but I'm not super interested in forcing myself to just do it all the time. You know, I haven't always been having the most fun, and sometimes I come home from work, my 10-hour day, and I'll just be tired and not have the energy to do it. So this gives me projects that I can do through the week and have a little bit more fun with. And that's kind of just my game plan with, you know, YouTube and Twitch in general, is just have fun. I'm happy not relying on it as a job anymore, and more so just as kind of like an outlet and a hobby. And this is a good way for me to do it. So if you like this, let me know. I'd appreciate it a lot. Smash the like button, leave a comment, all that kind of stuff. Thanks for watching, especially for you guys who made it this far in the video. Thank you. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys. No, well, not tomorrow, but sometime soon. Au revoir.